Hello and welcome to this special broadcast of CNN News 18. One individual may die for an idea, but after his death, that idea will incarnate into thousand lives. That's what Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose used to say and think. Now, today is the eve of 125th
That's
birth
okay.
anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and we are joined by none other than Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's daughter, Anita Bose Pfaff from Germany. Welcome, ma'am, to our show, and thanks that you have given us time from Germany. So that's a great thing for us. First question to you, ma'am, what's the feel that there is going to be a statue in India Gate for the first time after so many years? The Prime Minister himself will be there. They have announced that the hologram statue will be there initially, and then after a granite statue of Bose.
Well, thank you for having me on this program. And in response to your question, of course, having a statue in such a prominent place is a very touching thing. Of course, there are many statues of Netaji, also in Delhi, by the way. But of course, having a statue at India Gate in so close to Parliament House and to the president's residence and office is certainly a very prestigious thing. And I'm looking forward to seeing the statue in place. And of course, I hope it is going to be a nice one and aesthetically pleasing. But of course, remembering Netaji is in statues is a good thing. But I think what really will count most is if maybe not each and every Indian, but many Indians remember Netaji personally, remember what he stood for, remember what his values were, what his ideas were, what his ideals were, and that in a smaller or bigger way, whichever is possible for any one individual person, that they embrace these ideas and ideals of equality, gender equality, of communal harmony and respect for other religions, of trying to serve society at large and to help upgrade the life of those who are in a disadvantaged position. I think this is, of course, the most important thing, which in one way is easy, and on the other way it's simple. It's easy in the sense that it involves our daily activities. It's difficult because sacrifice and service always does is not always easy.
Ma'am, do you think that the question comes from there that even a film has been made like The Forgotten Hero? Do you really think that it is a little late that he got his due? Specifically, such a position in Delhi, and obviously in that national diaspora, he's an international figure. But getting that recognition is a little late.
I think my father has been given a great privilege in one thing. You cannot necessarily expect people who have never seen a person who didn't even live at the same time to remember him, to respect him. And I really have a feeling that there are many of those people who have never seen him who also love him for what he stood for. And I think this is a great privilege, and it's the reward for what he has sacrificed for his country. In other ways, of course, his contribution was not always recognized that much on from the public side, but that can partly be attributed also to the state of knowledge at a certain time. The first few years after independence, I think the impression was conveyed that it was mainly the nonviolence movement that led to India's freedom.
Yes.
But later on, as after 30 years and so on, whenever the declassification of documents took place, a number of informations became available, which showed that Netaji's activities and the INA activities, and also the consequences of their activities, certainly had a great impact on um, India's independence. What I'm thinking of in particular is, of course, the Red Fort trials. You might say the INA was lost in military terms, but I think they, uh, thanks to the British mistake of putting these three officers, Shahnawaz, Dhillon, and Saigal, on trial at the Red Fort, the news was spread, and their um, and they contributed to the country's
But,
independence
but
because
still, but ma'am, still after independence, when India got independence in the middle of the night, then this son of the soil, he was not, he did not got what he was supposed to get at that point of time. It took 30 years. Don't you think that that is late?
you might say it's late, but on the other hand, the fact that he still is remembered, I think counts a lot, because at that time, of course, there are a number of things on for historic reasons which led to that. Partly it was selfish things, selfish sentiments on the part of some of the of the day, and partly it was uh, lack of knowledge about some developments and all this and that. And one shouldn't forget, it was also a question of um, uh, viewing Netaji's attempt to get support from the fascist powers, uh, was viewed in a critical fashion. Of course, I'm certainly not a person who is in favor of fascism and racism, what both Germany and Japan at that time stood for. But Netaji didn't have much choice of where to seek support for
Yes.
India's independence, because he was fighting the British, and who were the others who would be willing to support India in the process? Certainly not the United States. The Soviet
Obviously.
Union was hedging, and then once the Soviet Union was attacked by Germany and entered the war on the side of the British, there were also no possible support. So it was really not a choice of a of countries that Netaji himself really respected for their individual ideologies. But it was a
But then he
question of,
said that he will shake hands with the enemy also to get another enemy out from there from his motherland, right? So there another question comes up back at home, that there is a tableau politics which we are seeing. And yesterday also when I was talking to you, you said that there should be a united effort in celebrating Netaji's birthday. So do and the opposition here, though it's a great effort of putting this statue here, but the opposition back at home is saying that it is just also to cast the tableau controversy. What do you have to say about that?
maybe it's asking too much to have everybody sort of join together in honoring Netaji for his birthday. I think it is not at all illegitimate that politicians also look at the politics of such an event, and that they try to carry it out in a fashion which is also to their own advantage. But in the sense, this squabble about the tableau uh, was sort of rather petty. I think one could have easily accepted the Bengal tableau and had another central government tableau as well. But anyway, it's better to have various efforts to honor Netaji even if they compete to an extent, than to forgetting him altogether.
Netaji used to say, as I started, that a person can die for an idea, and after his death, that idea will incarnate into thousand lives. Do you think, in today's scenario, the statesmen which we have, the politician which we have, they follow the ideology of Netaji?
Policies are always a very complex bundle of things. And of course, in some aspects, all along, also the Congress government, with all critical distance to Netaji, in the beginning, followed many policies which he might have done too, secularism, for example, and things like that. Essentially, a socialist. Uh, Policy in many matters. And of course, in other governments too, some of the policies coincided with what Netaji did call for, or might have called for, if he had been around. But in others again, it's not. And of course, you might see that in some economic matters, in present day government, the policies coincide with what he might have chosen to do. But on one issue, I'm rather critical, that I think the government could take a stronger stand in speaking out against communal conflicts, and could br- try to bring people together. That's not easy, but it certainly would also be of advantage to the government itself to have a more peaceful environment rather than constant difficulties. And the other thing which always distresses me is that India is not making enough headway in terms of well, I would say also gender equality, but also speaking out against violence against women.
So that's there. Another question comes up from there. The opposition always says, and earlier the opposition, like the people who were opposing Congress government, they used to say that Netaji is, Netaji has been kept in a mysterious way, or this the forgotten thing. This blames goes to Congress, and the BJP also blames Congress for not giving him his due. What is your take on that?
That is partly true, but it is Congress is not one sort of uniform, or any party for that matter is not one uniform unit. I mean, ultimately, it's always the human beings that are at work in a position, and of course, part of the Congress leadership might have been a bit jealous of Netaji, and sort of try to downplay him. But I almost had the feeling that very often it was really sort of the lower level people who thought that they pleased their leadership by doing that. May I give you an example as an episode?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
when Narasimha Rao was prime minister, he wanted to have the embassies sort of keep in touch with the NRIs, the non-Indian, the Indians who were residents abroad.
Hmm.
And so the Indian ambassador in Germany
Hmm.
informed his ministry, said that he would get in touch with me
Hmm.
and my family in the process, just to inform them about it.
Hmm.
And the reaction was, no, no, we have to ask the prime minister whether he wants that or not. And the prime minister was bothered with such a minor issue and said, yeah, well, of course, why not? But it was some intermediate level functionary who thought that he was pleasing the Congress leadership by sort of keeping a distance to Netaji's kin. And this occurred in other contexts too. But there were
So
always
this hurts. This hurts you. This hurts you.
one.
This hurts you when you feel bad about it. When such thing happens, you have seen. You have grown up with this.
Well, I must say I don't really bother that much about it. Partly, I think it is rather ridiculous. But what really is important, I think there was always a large number of people, also in the Congress leadership, who were admirers of Netaji, who I wouldn't say they were followers. Some of them were, some of them weren't. But it was not Congress as a whole that was against Netaji, but it was some people in Congress who were. And of course, I'm sure there are also some people in the other parties who are in favor of Netaji and others who are less so.
Two, ma'am, two definite last questions that we have to ask you is one, do you really believe that Netaji was stayed here like Gumnami Baba, number one? And number two, what do you think now that all the files should be declassified and the truth should come that when he disappeared, when he ended his life, he was the hero of the nation.
Well, I'm quite convinced that Gumnami Baba was not Netaji. In fact, there are some indications that he was a somewhat questionable personality.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think it is unthinkable that Netaji would have behaved that way
Hmm.
to come back to India, to live behind a curtain.
Hmm.
And it just doesn't tally at all. And
Hmm.
I think, in a way, it's a great insult to Netaji. That's why
Hmm.
it annoys me a lot. Quite apart
Hmm.
from the fact that I think it's so silly, but unfortunately, we see that in many
Hmm.
aspects, people are
Hmm.
sort of prone to all sorts of silly conspiracy theories, and look at the COVID situation now, where people think that Bill Gates is implanting chips in us with a vaccination or something.
Hmm. And,
Stupidity,
and
unfortunately, is
obviously, and the last question is: do you think that this should be declassified and truth should come up? Because still we don't know the truth. The
well, I
nation.
think most governments claim that everything has been declassified, almost everything. I could imagine that some things have not, but I think most of the things have been declassified. In fact, many of them long ago. Of course, immediately after independence or around that time, many of the things were not available yet. But since then, I think the important things had been declassified, at least in the 60s, 70s.
Hmm.
And of course, many people sort of thought that there was still uh, interesting material kept
Hmm.
back. But the files which the Chief Minister of West Bengal had declassified, and Prime Minister Modi at the central level did really not bring out anything terrible. In fact, some things were rather trite that were to be found, and so I mean, I'm in favor of all of declassifying all documents because I think, from a historic point of view, that is very relevant. But with regard to finding some outlandish theory of what might have been, I don't expect anything at all.
And what would have happened to him? What do you think?
Well, I think he died in a plane crash, or not in the plane crash, but as a consequence of a plane crash. And there is ample evidence of many eyewitnesses. I've been present in interviews with eyewitnesses of the plane crash. The doctor who tended to him has been interviewed. I think by now probably he has passed away, because he would be
Hmm.
uh, near about
Long.
100 or
Hmm.
so.
Hmm.
But he was alive till he was well over 90, and were witness to that he looked after him, and all that. So I think there is lots of evidence. Of course, if people said, "Yeah, but there might be," and I have heard, and this is this sort of hearsays. look at what people still think happened to President Kennedy and
Mhm.
his assassination.
So
So
we will be remembering Netaji as our national hero, and obviously the granite statue will come up. And obviously, the most important thing that, ma'am, you pointed out, and obviously the entire nation should follow that, his ideas, his ideology, his
indeed,
thinking of life, his thinking of, to stand up. That is important. That should be there with the people, and we hope that our nation, or the entire, the world grows up in the ideology of Netaji. Thanks a lot, ma'am, to for joining our special broadcast from Germany. Thanks a lot.
thank you and Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.